Will the SEC approving the first Bitcoin ETF launch $1 trillion into the cryptocurrency market? And will the new EPA rule about emissions drive truckers out of business? I'm Tricky Mick, and these are today's topics with Tricky. So let's get right into it. SEC approves first leveraged Bitcoin futures ETF. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has approved the first leveraged Bitcoin futures exchange traded fund on Friday. Volatility Shares 2x Bitcoin Strategy ETF, BITX, is scheduled to launch on the Chicago Board Options BZX exchange next Tuesday, June 27th. According to the SEC filing, BITX seeks investment results that correspond to 2 times the return of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Bitcoin Futures Daily Roll Index. An ETF or exchange traded fund bundles securities like stocks and commodities. Investors can buy shares of an ETF to gain exposure to those securities without owning them directly. In the case of Bitcoin ETFs, there have been 2 main types: Bitcoin futures and Bitcoin spot. The BITX fund will be a leveraged ETF. Leveraged funds use debt or financial derivatives, in this case, Bitcoin futures, as leverage to amplify the returns of a benchmark index. That leverage can mean short-term gains for investors, but it can also lead to big losses. Today's news was mostly lauded by cryptocurrency advocates across the market. However, it does leave space for some questions. When we look back on the Bitcoin ETF saga in 5 or 10 years, this will be one of the most ridiculous aspects: a 2x leveraged futures product launching before a straightforward spot ETF. Nate Garachi, co-founder of the ETF Institute, wrote on Twitter. He ended his tweet with "wild." Meanwhile, others pointed out that BITO, the U.S. first Bitcoin futures ETF, has underperformed BTC year to date, although it did jump on today's news against its USD pair. The asset notched a 3.45% gain on the day, reaching $17.57. According to Yahoo Finance, still down more than 50% from its all-time high of $43.32 in 2021. Bitcoin continues its rally, touching 31,000 today with a 3 to 4% gain. Approving BITX breathes some fresh air into the digital asset industry after the SEC sued 2 of the largest crypto exchanges earlier this month. The regulatory agency's head, Gary Gensler, has proved to be a staunch detractor of cryptocurrencies. With BlackRock applying for a Bitcoin ETF earlier this week, this could be a sign of the tides turning for the SEC's turbulent relationship with crypto. It might be a bit early, but the news is no doubt encouraging for investors. So do you think that $1 trillion is going to be flooded into the cryptocurrency market because of this? We're going to see at least some type of substantial investment start to grow with this. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to grow or if there's going to be a massive increase, but there's definitely going to be some type of increase in my opinion, which brings us to the next type of increase right now. The cost for truckers. The EPA rule will drive truckers out of business. I agree with that 100%, and I have seen it happen in the past with the emissions regulations being increased, as well as the ELD mandates, increasing costs for small business owners across the board. So let's get started. Despite failing to override President Joe Biden's veto, Senator Deb Fischer, Nebraska, maintained that an aggressive emissions regulation on heavy-duty trucks would harm small businesses and increase inflation, which it does. We know that for a fact. The EPA's heavy-duty vehicle emission rule is going to drive truckers out of business and raise prices for every American family, which is already done significantly in many ways, Fisher said in a statement. Despite bipartisan support in both chambers for my legislation, most of my Democratic colleagues weren't willing to take a stand today against President Biden's extreme regulatory agenda. I'll continue to fight to Nebraskans and our economy from the devastating impact of more government overreach. Late last year, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency issued a final rule that will impose strict clean air standards for heavy-duty trucks beginning with the model year 2027. The EPA estimated the technology required to meet the new rule standards will cost between $2,568 and $8,304 per vehicle. The American Truck Dealers Association estimates it is more likely a $42,000 increase per truck. In total, the EPA projects the associated cost of this new regulation on the country could reach $55 billion over the lifetime of the program, which will fall downhill to consumers. Fisher's resolution, which would have blocked the EPA mandate, passed the Senate in April and the House in May. However, as promised, Biden used his veto power to kill the resolution. On June 21st, the Senate received 50 votes to override the veto, which fell far short of the 67 votes, or two-thirds majority, needed. The veto being upheld allows the EPA to move toward the regulation beginning with 2027 trucks. However, legal challenges are expected. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association supported Fisher's resolution and will continue to work toward fighting burdensome requirements from the EPA. While we are disappointed in the president's decision to veto this bipartisan legislation, we thank the Democrats and Republicans in Congress who put politics aside in support of small business truckers simply trying to navigate wave after wave of EPA regulations. OIDA President Todd Spencer said in a statement on June 15th. As the White House issues their veto, EPA is working to finalize another round of burdensome emissions requirements and pushing for electric commercial trucks without any practical concern regarding purchasing costs, mileage range, battery weight, or changing availability. Now, I completely agree with this, as I've been in the trucking industry my whole life. I come from a trucking family of someone who owned 5 tankers when I was a little boy. And as trucks have increased in price more and more and more, they're pushing small business owners out and allowing the centralization of the trucking industry in general to happen. So I'm curious to know what your opinions are on things like the SEC approving a new Bitcoin ETF and the EPA implementing rules that are completely backwards towards the businesses in this country being able to be profitable and run on a small business owner aspect. So what are your thoughts? I'm Tricky, and these are today's topics.